I'm not sick or struck dumb, or don't you know a kick when you see one can't quit? We're not done, we're gonna kick till the next one.
Hello, fine people, and welcome to The Kick. This is a movie podcast on the Now Playing Network. I am your host, Chance Solom Pfeiffer, or as some people have called me, Special Agent Chancey Nebraska. We are in the home stretch of this sports romance kick. We've done movies about soccer, surfing, basketball, pairs figure skating, and tennis in this series. But today, a movie that will not confine itself to one sport because rules are no way to experience the ultimate rush. Today, it's a film about what happens when you're an FBI agent who becomes captivated by the lifestyle and mojo of the perfect sun-bleached skydiving, surfing bank robber. It's Point Break, baby, and here to discuss, some have called him a kick fixture, some have called him Special Agent Benny Oregon. He is, as of this recording, the Assistant Arts and Culture Editor for Willamette Week. It's Bennett Campbell Ferguson.
Hey, Chance. Thanks for having me. Glad I get an agent nickname, too.
I was just, trying with the states and the E's, but it turns out that only Johnny Utah sounds cool. Chancey Nebraska does not. Benny Oregon's a little better. But, I was trying them all for the first time as they came out of my mouth.
If I do a surfing movie, it'll be called Benny and the Boards.
Oh, I like that. Very good. Ben, I feel like I told you I was going to do this sports romance series, 5 months ago or something. And immediately you were like, what about Point Break? Why did you think of Point Break the instant I said sports romance movies?
Well, my favorite sports movie is actually Chariots of Fire, but the romance in that is so peripheral that I immediately ruled it out. And I guess I fixated on Point Break because I feel that the relationship between Johnny and Bodhi really is a classical romance. I think often when you fall in love with someone, it's not just about that person, it's about the world they represent. And there's that great scene where they're surfing at night where Johnny, in that classic Keanu way, says, "I can't explain what I'm feeling right now." He's not just in love with the lifestyle, he's in love with surfing itself, he's in love with the ocean. And Bodhi is sort of the epitome of all of that to him. Bodhi is kind of the colossus in which all that love is coalescing. And then in terms of how Bodhi feels about Johnny, I think in a way it's kind of a classic Henry Higgins, Eliza Doolittle type relationship where Bodhi wants to mold Johnny. It's not enough for Bodhi to outwit him. Bodhi has to transform his worldview. He has to teach him. He has to make Johnny love the rush and love the freedom that this lifestyle offers as much as he does. And I think there's just inherently something very romantic about that. And you could see it in terms of a very literal romance. That's kind of how I see it. Or you could see it simply as a meditation on the way that male friendships can be incredibly complex and romantic, just like female friendships. And so for all of those reasons, the movie instantly jumped out at me as a possibility.
You still haven't figured out what riding waves is all about, have you? It's a state of mind. It's that place where you lose yourself and you find yourself. You don't know it yet, but you got it. It's right there. It's not tragic to die doing what you love. Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll. Everybody freeze! Somebody move! Keep your hands up and your eyes down! We are the ex-presidents. FBI! Freeze!
Special Agent John Utah, day number 1 in L.A. Welcome aboard.
You want to nail the bank robbers and be a big hero.
Definitely.
That's Bodhi. They call him the Bodhisattva.
If you want the ultimate, you gotta be willing to pay the ultimate price.
Short trust tomorrow. Next day outside the latest.
Everything moves in cycles. So twice a century, the ocean lets us know just how small we really are.
It's the ultimate rush. There's nothing that comes close to it. Not even sex.
Johnny has his own demons. Don't you, Johnny?
So Johnny Utah, played by Keanu Reeves, He's fresh out of Quantico at the beginning of this movie, and he's all geared up to start his FBI fieldwork in LA. And seemingly on day one of the job, a gang of bank robbers called the Ex-Presidents, they hit their 27th bank in 3 years. And it's a case no one can crack, but Utah's new partner, Angelo, played by Gary Busey, has a wild theory that they might be surfers, because the robberies only take place over the summer, and they seem to follow the breakers up and down the coast. So despite the field office believing that this theory is crazy, Utah goes undercover. He learns how to surf from a local named Tyler, played by Lori Petty. That's a relationship that brings him into contact with Bodie, played by Patrick Swayze, who is an adrenaline prophet who leads a gang of surfing thrill seekers. And as I was writing the synopsis earlier, I was like, and this is where like the plot should get all like, you know, tangled up, and this like big misdirection over who's the robber, and is it Bodie, and can Utah bear for it to be Bodie? But the movie doesn't really do that. It kind of just charges ahead. It's very clearly Bodie. There's one tiny bit of misdirection. And what you have then is just a series of like breathtaking action set pieces. And it's not really even a question of like whether Utah can like bear to catch him. It's more like, can he keep up physically with Bodie as the bank robber continues to involve him in crazier and crazier stunts for the pure rush, for the companionship, for the competition. And in that way, it kind of sneaks in its sports movie bona fides in addition to just the sports looking amazing. Ben, anything you would add to that in terms of what people need to understand before we go all in on Point Break?
No, I think that sums it up nicely. I like that you described Bodie as an adrenaline prophet. I think the prophet part of that sentence is very important.
I thank you for that compliment. I guess brief production story. So Point Break is one of those kind of classic Hollywood action movie productions where one guy, Rick King, who directed some 80s action exploitation movies, had an idea one day, and he's like, what if surfers rob banks? And then they kind of took that nugget to a promising young screenwriter, W. Peter Iliff, who then wrote a screenplay called Johnny Utah that sort of sat in development hell for about 5 years. Ridley Scott was attached. They didn't make it, blah, blah, blah. And then Kathryn Bigelow comes along, who at the time is married to James Cameron. And they're like, we'll make this. And Kathryn Bigelow, it's her fourth movie. She made Loveless, Near Dark, Blue Steel, but this is a big escalation in terms of scale and star power. And that would lead us to a quick tale of the tape for Point Break. $83.5 million at the box office in 1991. Pretty good. 122 minutes long, the perfect length. 30. That would be the number of jumps out of an airplane that Patrick Swayze did before the studio was like, you have to stop doing this. We cannot insure you if you are going to just go be Bodie and jump out of airplanes every chance you get and take the rest of the cast. And in exchange for stopping, I believe he got to do the climactic jump where you see it as very clearly Patrick Swayze throwing himself backward out of an airplane with no cut. The number 40, that's the number of takes it took to do that epic John C. McGinley walk and talk at the beginning on Utah's first day. 2, the iconic number of meatball sandwiches that Angelo once brought to him during the bank stakeout. And 3, the number of meatball sandwiches that Angelo realizes he wanted after he sees that it's just 2 and how hungry he is. That's what I got. So Ben, I think you perfectly explained at the top the ways in which this is a romance. And I very much agree. Bodie and Johnny don't hook up or have a love scene or whatever. But insofar as romance is about adventure, mystery, excitement, having your life changed by a person, feeling somewhat possessive toward another person, a sense of knowing that other person better than anyone else does, being the person that they would choose to die with. This is not a crazy case at all. I think it makes a lot of sense for the movie, not to mention just the physical intimacy that these two characters show on screen, which is near constant. What I'm curious about, and you kind of alluded to this, maybe you could say more about the the Henry Higgins Liza Doolittle thing is, I think there's a way in which it's very clear how Johnny idolizes Bodhi with the help of the camera and with the help of how every movie felt about Patrick Swayze between 1983 and 1991. I rewatched the original Roadhouse the other day, and just like everyone in that movie wants to fuck Dalton. Like every single character who appears on screen is just like, that guy's really hot. He's really perfect. I think I feel something for him. This is kind of just the Swayze promise in those years. But I wonder what energy is coming back from Bodhi to Utah. Do you think he wants to convert him?
I do, absolutely. And I think it all comes from that scene where we're seeing Bodhi and the team right after they've done the bank robbery where Johnny has chased them. And this realization of, oh, Johnny's an FBI agent. He's been infiltrating our community. He could very easily bust us at this point. He knows who we are. And at that point, the solution is obvious. You either have to kill Johnny or you have to get out of town. That's the cleanest path to take. And it seems that some of the other team members are arguing for that. And Bodhi is the one who's like, no, I'll deal with him. Well, how's he going to deal with him? He's going to kidnap his girlfriend. He's going to take him skydiving. He's going to make him rob a bank with them, potentially destroying Johnny's FBI career. So he has no choice but to join Bodhi. It's this really, really insane, almost Rube Goldbergian plan that puts everyone's lives at risk.
Yeah.
And he's basically doing all that to convert Johnny. And that speaks to a kind of fixation, I think, on Bodhi's part, where it's not enough for Johnny just to be a disciple. He loves Johnny in a way that he doesn't love even his other close friends. I mean, that scene where they first fight with the surf Nazis, and I'm going to mangle the line, but Bodhi says something to Johnny like, "You were great out there. You were a pit bull. You didn't back down." And there's this respect for this guy and this desire to win him over that is intense and leads to lots of glorious violence and bloodshed. It's magnificent to behold.
And to add on to that, the life transformation that Bodhi is trying to draw him into is all like experiential. They don't even really like hit the narrative nail on the head. There's no moment where Bodhi is like, to complete your transformation, like, you gotta kill a cop, Johnny. Like, let's see if you're really one of us or whatever, which is, such a cliche in any movie where someone is undercover and like loses themselves and loses their identity or whatever. It's all about like being suspended in the act of the bank robbery. And the iconic skydiving scene too is like that. There's no the why make him jump out of a plane with you is just all about, when everybody knows who everyone is at that point. It's just all about the like, well, I bet if you have this experience with me, you will not be able to say no and or remember why you even got here because we're free falling.
Yeah, I mean, once you get a taste of the holy water, how are you going to be able to let go of the promise of transcendence and this idea of experience? And it's so core to who Bigelow is as an artist. I think it's so interesting that she would, when she talked about the Hurt Locker, she would describe it as a nonpartisan film. And I don't necessarily think she's completely right about that, but I do think she was speaking to the idea that movie is just totally on the ground about the experience of being a bomb disposal expert in the moment. And all of her movies are that. All of her movies are kind of pure, primal, in the moment. And primal is another word I know she used a lot to describe her.
You're right. She's about the moment. even to the, it's funny, I think the corollary to like, is the Hurt Locker political, is I heard her say about this movie, she's like, Johnny Utah, he's an everyman. And I'm like, no, he's not. Are you out of your mind? He played quarterback in the Rose Bowl, and now he's an FBI agent. But to her, she's like, these people could be anyone, and they disappear in the slipstream of these moments.
Yes.
Let's duck to the sports side for a second before we do full Kathryn Bigelow nerd out. When you think of Point Break, do you think of it more as a surfing movie, a skydiving movie, a beach football movie? Do you refuse on moral grounds to even answer this question, Ben?
I will insist on moral grounds on answering all of the above.
Okay, there you go.
But I believe it's, in a really unique way, a kind of genre hybrid of sports movie and action movie.
Yeah.
There are certain sequences that only make sense in sort of action movie grammar. I mean, the bank robbery, that outstanding foot chase through the neighborhood, that's pure action movie glory. But then on the other hand, it's so perfectly and beautifully playing into these archetypes of the sports movie. I mean, there's even a great training montage.
Yeah.
Got it all. And it's packaging all of these things in a really fluid package that shouldn't work, and yet it all flows together. It defines and yet defies genre, just like Bodhi defies the man.
Let's talk about one of those scenes, because as I was rewatching it last night, I was like, okay, I think this movie may have 3 transcendent scenes, which to me were like the house raid on the neo-Nazi surfers, the foot chase, and then the first jump. But then I was like, are those even the right 3 scenes? Are there actually maybe 8 instead of 3? Do you have a favorite scene, Ben? And would you care to break it down a little bit?
Yeah. I think of the scenes you mentioned, the foot chases, my favorite, because I just love the detail of it and the way the geography is so clearly established, and these really crisp, clear moments, like, Bodhi running through a little plastic swimming pool that looks like it belongs to just a kid and the neighborhood, and it's just so alive with these great details. The dog getting thrown out of Johnny's face or thrown in his face.
Yeah.
It's so extraordinary to me that the scene is so clear and so easy to follow, and yet still makes room for these kind of out of nowhere surprises that sort of shock you and terrify you. And I would not have said this a few years ago, but the more I've thought about the movie, the more I think that my ultimate favorite scene in the whole thing is the last scene on Bell's Beach in Australia, incidentally actually shot at Ecola State Park.
That's right. Not just,
So
30 miles south of here, baby.
Yay!
I've been on that beach. I've looked for those handcuffs. They're not there. Tell me what you love about that scene.
I love that after all that has happened in this movie, you could easily imagine a more conventional ending, where after Johnny and Tyler are reunited and Bodhi's like, Johnny, I'll see you in the next life, and he drives off. I think a more conventional director would say, okay, this is the point where we cut to like the final scene where like cozy domestic order is restored.
100%.
Johnny and Tyler are in front of the fireplace and they're happy, but maybe there's just a teeny bit of regret. Johnny's like, I wonder if Bodhi's still out there.
Yeah, he's looking at the waves out of his nice middle-class house.
Totally. Yeah. And instead, you get, to my mind, one of the all-time great scenes, this apocalyptic storm converging on the beach. Everyone getting away from that beach, except Johnny, who goes down there just to find Bodhi, and is like, you're going down. and it's very easy to laugh at, and I do. And like some lines like, I can't handle a cage, man. And yet, god damn it, I do find it really moving the way
Yeah.
these two men love each other, and Johnny defies everything he supposedly stands for to give Bodhi back to the sea, to kind of release him into the great beyond. He will never see him again. He's letting him go off to his death. He's letting him die on his own terms. And then the moment when he throws the FBI badge away, and this guy who is so obsessive and so obsessed with being the perfect agent, I even take the skin off of chicken, sir. And yet in the end, he like literally throws that away out on the sand. And to me, like the possibility that that implies is so interesting. Who is Johnny after this moment? We know he's not going to be the man he has been throughout this entire film. He's forever changed. And again, that's what great love stories do.
Special Agent Utah. I knew I could count on you. I've been to every city in Mexico. Came across an unclaimed piece of meat in Baja. Turned out to be Rosie. Guess you picked a knife fight with somebody better. Found a passport of yours in Sumatra. Missed you by about a week in Fiji. But I knew you wouldn't miss a 50-year storm, Bodhi. Yeah.
I'm glad that you love that scene. It's really an amazing job of, like, I mean, all movies are cut together, but like this movie manages to cut together the natural extremity of those sports with the characters like it had never even really dawned on me that the skydiving scene wasn't all filmed in the sky. Which, of course, and then I like saw the making of footage. I'm like, well, obviously it wasn't all filmed in the sky. I'm such an idiot. But this movie, like, it maintains that illusion beautifully, as well as the idea that those 50-foot Australian swells are happening right next to this slightly tamer beach in Oregon. I want to come back to the foot chase scene real fast, just to shout out a few things. One of the awesome things there is they're working with what they call a pogo cam, which is like a version of Steadicam, but it's just like lighter and attached to a pole, which is how they're able to get around those corners in such a way. And like when one of them hops over a fence, you literally feel the DP like just sticking the camera in the air like a crane, like a handheld crane to follow them over the fence. It just creates like such an amazing level of kineticism. The cut when the woman is scared that Bodhi's run into her house in the Reagan mask and she throws the laundry into the camera lens and it cuts is just like sublime. And yeah, just really maybe deceptively simple, like athletic filmmaking that you wonder, like it must be really hard to block this, which I think it is. I mean, Bigelow talked about like how much storyboarding is involved, but when you're just like, why isn't every action movie made where like the actor is sprinting toward the camera and then runs past the camera and then the camera runs after them? Like that just seems like such a natural, like physical human way to make a movie. But you see it and it's exhilarating. You're like, I feel like I have never seen anyone shoot a chase like this before, even though it makes total sense that if you were a 9-year-old making a home movie and you wanted to make running look badass, you would let the person run after you and then you would run after them. And it's breathtaking.
It is, and there is the perfect balance of velocity and clarity.
Yeah.
And the idea that if Bodhi runs around a corner, if Johnny's chasing him, you have to see Johnny run around that same corner. And yet it doesn't feel like a bunch of actors, just hitting their marks. Even though it's very controlled, it feels completely out of control. And I really want to see more foot chases in movies. My thing I always kind of scream at characters in action movies is, get out of your cars and run. I mean, the limitations or perceived limitations of the human body make these things just so exciting. It's such a high. And honestly, like if I were to list like my favorite action scenes, I think most of them would be foot chases.
Yeah. I don't need to go into a small crisis that I had last night watching this of just like, oh, we've just lost the physical world in movies and maybe in life. Watching a movie like this where that's just so bound to glass doors and jumps and knees and dogs and towels.
Well, and even though there are some great action filmmakers working today, and to stay on Keanu, of course, John Wick has done great fight scenes, but John Wick exists in a sort of deliberately mythic, unrealistic universe, and that's part of its appeal. That's why it's so much fun.
Totally.
But there's something thrilling about seeing Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze run through this very real suburban type neighborhood, and the details and that and the sense of like an extraordinary action scene interrupting ordinary life. It's such a high.
Last thing I'll say about it is also the score is Mark Isham, right?
Yeah.
Who, I think if you look at his filmography, like, he does all right. He's got a couple times where he like rises above, but I think this is one time he like really rises above. The drums in that chase scene, where it's just like it's basically a bass drum doubled with like a cymbal or a hi-hat or something like that, which just perfectly is like, well, Bodhi's the bass drum and the kind of clattering lighter hi-hat is Johnny, just like chasing each other in perfect unison. And then also I really love the musical work in the skydiving jump. It would be so easy to just have, 10,000 violinists just like play the high E string in all out majesty. And instead, I think to my ears, it maybe sounds like a couple of cellos, mostly playing like middle and low tones, giving this idea that just like, despite, as I said, the fact that it doesn't make any sense for Johnny to be there, this is like the catharsis of this moment is just being pulled out of his like stomach, and the music like does that perfectly. Let's talk Keanu. The arguments over whether he is good or whether he is bad as an actor have been like presented and revised so many times over the course of his and our lifetime. I mean, he is someone who is like promising and then a laughingstock, and then no, he's actually really good, and then a laughingstock again, and then finally now we're back to no, he's really, really good. It's just been quite a roller coaster ride. This performance as Johnny Utah, I think we definitely were like laughing at it a bit, when I was an idiot 17-year-old. Some of the line readings are crazy, but that will always kind of happen with Keanu. Tell me kind of how you assess this performance, Ben.
Well, it's interesting because I am definitely in the camp where I think he's a genuinely good actor. And if anyone who doesn't believe me, go watch Always Be My Maybe and watch how he plays himself.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely outrageous way. He has become, I think, an incredibly clever, self-aware, nuanced performer. But also, I think a lot of that comes with age. Just look at the difference between how he played Neo in the first Matrix and how he plays Neo in the Matrix Resurrections. And there was definitely, when he was younger, I think, a kind of wet behind the ears quality and a lack of some of the subtlety that is there now. And you can hear it. You rightly, Chance, alluded to some of these pretty out there line readings. One that comes to mind is when he says to Tyler, "It could really affect things between us." I mean, I've seen that. I've seen it a million times, and it's still very hard to keep a straight face during that. And so some of these moments, it's like, well, I could never technically call that good acting. But then on the other hand, I kind of think the movie would have been worse if it had had an actor who at that point in their career was, more quote unquote good. I mean, this movie would be so bad if it had like a young Russell Crowe or something. I think you kind of needed this actor who was goofily sincere and could play Johnny in this blunt, almost cartoonish way. And that just fits perfectly the kind of kitschy appeal of the movie. And without that, it wouldn't be Point Break.
You're dead on. I think they wanted Charlie Sheen and Johnny Depp before they got around to Keanu. Those movies are both much worse.
Yes.
If he is in fact Eliza Doolittle, he needs to be kind of moldable and weird and raw and trying too hard.
Yes.
And that's what he is. And the one thing I'll say is I tried to sort out some of the worst lines coming out of his mouth, also when he's trying to talk to Tyler on the phone, he's like, "Oh, why can't I ever say what I mean?" And even the kind of end where he's just like, "You got to go down, man." Those lines are also the ones that maybe feel like remnants of a more conventional script, where it's just like, oh, well, the person he's really interested in expressing himself to is Tyler. And it's like, no, he's not. So, of course, when he bites into that line, it's like, well, the story's not doing him any. It's kind of putting him out on an island. And at the end, he didn't care about the law. So being like, "You got to go down, man," is also those are more like window dressing that unfortunately someone is like, "You have to yell the window dressing. Is that cool?" Whereas all the acting that goes more to the core text, including how goofy he is at the beginning, where he says things like, "I even take the skin off chicken, sir." He's both trying too hard and definitely making fun of his new supervisor. And he rides that line amazingly, where he's just he's taking the piss out of everyone, and yet he is still a wet behind the ears try hard. And I think he's really good at riding that line.
Yeah. He's very guileless, too.
Yes.
And it's funny, even when he tells that bogus story to Tyler about his parents being killed, even though technically I know that he's making that story up and that his parents are actually alive, just the way Keanu plays it, I kind of think that maybe Johnny has really convinced himself that his parents are dead, because there's a kind of innocence to it. I don't really believe that Johnny is someone who is capable of lying. So I think to tell a lie in a way, he has to go totally method, where he's like, "Yeah, that's totally what happened,"
Yeah, to go totally method, this character only had to push aside one other thought. He only has one thought at a time.
Yeah, exactly. He's in the moment. It's back to the moment.
He's in the moment, baby. You, Ben, I know you to be a Kathryn Bigelow Turbo fan. I've never met someone more enthusiastic about Strange Days. Where do you most see Bigelow's directorial signature in this movie? And where does Point Break fall for you in your... I assume you have some Bigelow rankings working at all given times.
I do, indeed. To me, it's her second best film. I would say Strange Days is absolutely my favorite by quite a long distance. The Hurt Locker is my third favorite, so Point Break right between the two. As far as how her directorial signature is felt in this film, there's so many ways, because I think this was a hugely personal film for her. And she and James Cameron did an uncredited rewrite on it, so I think the story really bears her stamp. But if I have to pick one thing, I think back to her big short film debut, which was a movie called The Setup, where two dudes were beating the shit out of each other while two semiotics professors narrated.
Oh.
And you think about that, well, that's the key to her whole filmography. This very intellectual approach that, reflects her fine arts background, reflects, I think, her training as a painter. And yet there is this totally unpretentious side that I think really does just want to entertain the audience. And that level of intelligence, but sort of no, false errors about trying to teach us in some sort of pedantic way, the way she kind of effortlessly straddles those spheres, I think, is extraordinary. And this film is a perfect example of that.
One lingering question then. If we're going to argue that this movie is primarily a romance between Johnny and Bodhi, where does that leave Tyler and the Lori Petty performance? Do you feel like it kind of inherently gets short shrifted by reading the movie this way? Or does it serve some other purpose in Point Break?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Chance, because, even though obviously Johnny and Bodhi, I think, are the core of everything we love about the movie, I actually really love the character of Tyler, too. And I love Lori Petty's performance. And I think she does have an important role in the narrative in that she is actually the mentor figure. I mean, you would kind of think Bodhi would fulfill that role, but actually not so much. It's Tyler who teaches Johnny how to surf. It's Tyler who actually shows him the technical ins and outs of mastering the waves, who, teaches him like how to stand on a board properly. And, she essentially is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of this story. Or you could even say the Morpheus of the story. Like Morpheus, she gets rescued at the end. But I think there is a kind of interesting argument to be made, though, about Tyler's deliberate irrelevance. And I almost think that perhaps Bigelow is consciously making a point by sidelining her character. And it's so fascinating to me that the whole last act revolves around Johnny trying to rescue Tyler. And yet the focus really seems to be on Johnny and Bodhi using Tyler as this kind of conduit, which they can sort of process all their emotions and how they feel about each other. And when Johnny and Tyler reunite, it's so funny that it's almost like they breeze past it, really. And not to keep harping on this, but the fact that you don't see them together after that, and that when you cut to the next scene, the final scene on the beach, it's just Johnny and Bodhi. Tyler is not mentioned once, even though she was an important part of both of their lives. And I think it's really intriguing that Bodhi says, "Are you still surfing?" And Johnny's like, "Every day." He talks about surfing. He doesn't talk about Tyler. And I think whether by serendipity or design, that became the movie's way of saying, yes, Tyler is important. Yes, she has a role in shaping Johnny's life. But at the end of the day, it's all about the men. It's all about their relationships. Another way in which this movie kind of previews what was to come in The Hurt Locker, where the scenes on the home front are so deliberately perfunctory. All the important things, not only in terms of the violence, but in terms of the emotion, are happening on the battlefield, and that holds true here as well.
Totally. Yeah, I don't know if I always buy what this movie or this script purports to be saying about the law and the systems that keep people in line. I actually think it's often kind of silly the way Bodhi is why you can be the ruler of you can create the rule of law and be the ruler. And I'm just like, is that what's happening here? What are we talking about?
Well, these characters are all idiots.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think if the whole man versus the system read is actually a little bit nonsensical, what happens, I think, to Tyler is that she becomes the moral line in the movie of just I don't know if Johnny Utah believes in the role of the FBI in society, but I know at a certain point he's like, well, you don't treat people this way. You don't you don't treat the person you don't treat our closest connection as a pawn in a fucking game.
Yes.
So I think that kind of becomes the split between more, thrill-seeking with a human attachment versus more nihilistic thrill-seeking, perhaps. And, I mean, yeah, it's not amazing, perhaps, that the only woman in the movie, doesn't get her due intentionally, but, I think that is inherent to the major subversion that the movie is making, and why you can even talk about Point Break in this category.
Part of, empowering women as filmmakers is saying you don't have to like always make movies about women.
Right.
You should, if you want to, you should, if, those are the stories you want to tell, but, really you should, just make, whatever like kind of sparks to you about the story. And I think in this movie, like, it's pretty clear what really kind of drew her like a heat-seeking missile into this particular narrative.
She's playing with it so deliberately. I was thinking last night too, Bodhi is like, I don't think we have a phrase for it. What is the male equivalent of the femme fatale? Who, Johnny is the detective who meets this striking blonde who is sort of free from all the societal strictures that seem to weigh him down. And what will happen when he goes into the world of, like, I don't know what you call it, like the mask morbide. I don't know.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's so intentional.
Well, I love that you bring up the femme fatale element, and even Johnny just seeing Bodhi for the first time, seeing him out there on the waves, and it's this big epic moment. And well, hey, that's the equivalent of Fred McMurray seeing, Barbara Stanwyck's anklet as she comes down the stairs in Double Indemnity. I mean, it's classic cinema right there.
That rules. All right, let's go to the montage round here. Who's your favorite supporting player in this movie, Ben?
Easiest answer, Gary Busey. I mean, that moment where he throws that punch and is like, I have one thing that you don't. Respect for my elders. I mean, he's just amazing. And actually, I kind of love that character. He's so abrasive and obnoxious, but there's the kind of sweetness to him. It's genuinely sad when he dies. Like,
it's extremely sad. I kind of always forget that he has the back of his body ripped out by shotgun blasts. It's not great.
Well, maybe I can do better than some over-the-hill burnout.
Hey, watch your mouth.
Maybe you ought to just take some early retirement right now and get some rent-a-cop night security job. Tell Nom stories.
Listen, you snot-nosed little shit. I was taking shrapnel in Quezon while you were grabbing it in your hands and rubbing it on your face.
You mad?
Yeah, I'm mad.
Good and mad.
Yeah, what do you want to do about it?
Feels good, doesn't it? Like you're still alive, right?
Yeah.
Well, since you're still alive and you're not in the box just yet, why don't you tell me this theory of yours and we'll go get these guys?
So Johnny Utah goes undercover using his own name. Is that very silly or secretly very shrewd?
I think it's very silly, but then again, John David Washington made the same mistake in BlacKkKlansman. So I don't know, maybe this happens all the time.
Yeah, I was trying to think it's absurd, but then maybe he has to expect that because he was a college quarterback for a major program that someone will recognize him, which Bodhi does the second time that they meet, and thus, had he been going by a different name, he would have been caught in a lie, so maybe it was all intentional?
See, you're selling me on the fact that maybe it's genius.
Yeah. But yeah, that I never thought about that. I was halfway through the movie, and I'm like, wait, his name's Johnny Utah. He's undercover? What's going on? Speaking of things I'd never thought about before, in the final bank robbery into which Johnny is strung along, Bodhi instructs his gang to go get the money out of the safe, which they've never done previously. They always just get the cash in the drawer and they run because takes too long to get the money from the safe. The movie never says out loud why he does that. What do you think?
I think that Bodhi is sort of like a cult leader, and like a lot of cult leaders, he rallies people around this vaguely anti-capitalist philosophy. We represent the power of the human spirit to the people driving in their metal coffins, bro. But I think, like a lot of cult leaders, he is ultimately kind of a hypocrite, and that's part of what makes him a complex and interesting character. And I love the idea that even Bodhi is not immune to the lure of capitalism. I mean, the idea that he breaks his own rule and goes for the safe, that he can't resist getting that one last extra big payday. There is something so twisted and tragic about that, and just the fact that they say at the beginning, like, oh, that's their secret. They never go for the vaults. It's kind of like a Chekhov's gun kind of thing. Like, if a rule is established, it has to be broken. And yeah, I think that's really fascinating that you bring up. They never really explain it, and yet it seems weirdly inevitable, you know?
Yeah, totally. I think it's cool that it's left ambiguous. I actually had my read on it as he's just, Johnny is dressing him down. You're breaking your own rules, man. You're taking too long. And he's just standing up there on the counter in the constantly leering, grinning Reagan mask. And he just like stares back at him. He says nothing. And I'm sort of like, is this a person who in this moment is just sort of overdosing on adrenaline, where he's just like, well, you know what would be fucking more radical than getting away would be like taking 45 seconds too long and just like standing here getting high while we run out of time.
All right. Jump to the back, big man. Fucking going in a fucking tunnel. Okay, it's a bad idea. Put your hand on the ground. Don't look at me. You're blowing it, man. You're breaking your own rules. You're pulling too much time.
Jimmy, how we doing?
65. What's happening?
Don't worry, man. It's fine. It's fine. It's great.
Fuck.
All the time in movies, something is happening and we like see news footage of it. And they're like, this is today's media sensation is what's happening in this movie. And I'm always like, I don't know if I totally buy that everyone would be so into this. This movie, can you imagine, Ben, if 4 men who wore ex-presidents' masks robbed 30 banks and how that would be covered in the media? And this movie is just like, nope, they're just getting away with it. It's just a Tuesday afternoon. Doesn't nobody talk about it? Doesn't mean nothing. It's so amazing how not interested this movie is in like the popularity of these men, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if the world can be obsessed with like Tiger King, you would think that there would be like multiple miniseries and true crime podcasts.
It would be the only thing we talked about if people in president masks robbed 30 banks.
Yeah. And I recognize that the movie's like presumably taking place when it came out in the early 90s. But I think even then, like, wouldn't this be on the front page of like every newspaper in America?
I mean, yes. Oh, like consider the OJ trial that's going to happen in this city like 2 years later. It would be like that. Have you ever seen the 2015 remake?
So I have a dark, terrible confession to make, Chance. I saw the remake before I saw the original.
Oh, wow. That's way darker than I thought it was going to be. What did you think of the movie having not seen Point Break?
Well, the weird thing is, and I saw it, by the way, because it was like a free screening on campus, and that was one of my favorite things to do in college, to see, shitty movies in an auditorium with, other students.
For free.
It was just, it was a fun, like, weird, party, shit on the movie kind of atmosphere. And I thought it was really entertaining and stupid. And I also thought it had a surprisingly good score by Junkie XL. The music that plays when, Bodhi 2.0 dies is pretty epic, I gotta say. But it's one of those things where I could never watch the remake again, now having seen the original, because whatever so dumb it's awesome thrill you get from the remake is nothing compared to the real deal, to say the least.
Yeah. I've never seen it, but I've always just considered it to be like possibly one of the worst ideas for a remake, because like Point Break doesn't leave any meat on the bone. You can watch it so many different ways. You can watch it as a romance. You can watch it as a comedy. You can watch it as this like melodrama where the lines teeter toward being funny. You can just get on the level of it as a completely badass action movie, or just like sink into the overtones of like, these sports really are just extreme. This movie's awesome. Like I don't see there being anywhere for a movie to go tonally that this movie doesn't go itself.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And it's just such a weird kind of science experiment of a movie where all these combustible elements, none of which should have worked together, all came together and worked like gangbusters. There's just such folly in trying to recreate it. Anything that tries to do that is inevitably going to feel, I think, kind of safe and anodyne, as the remake ultimately did.
Which on-set story from Point Break would you most like to have been present for, Ben? Options include Swayze telling Keanu, "You'll just have to catch me," when they're filming the football game, as in like, you'll just have to match my speed and tackle me into the ocean if you want to tackle me. Bigelow having them rehearse the foot chase, do every little step, and then just be like, and now we're going to do it faster, and now we're going to do it faster, and now you're going to do it even faster. Or Anthony Kiedis missing all the stunt sessions and then being pissed that his character gets knocked out with one punch.
I don't know. I mean, to be on stage set for the foot chase, I think would be pretty damn cool.
It really would be. Of just like, okay, good job. You stuck your foot in the baby pool, but now I need you to, make it from the pool through the sliding glass door in like, 0.5 seconds. Keanu Reeves' 1991 is My Own Private Idaho, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and Point Break, which this sent me down a rabbit hole this morning. That probably is one of the best years for an actor of all time. And I know this is an unscientific thing because movies are made and then they all come out in the same year. That's purely luck of the draw in the confines of an arbitrary calendar. But I guess would you agree that that's probably one of the better acting years of all time? And what else would you put? Do you have any other ones you'd put up there?
I mean, I think that's, got to be one of the best acting years ever in terms of showing what he could do in very, very different movies.
Yeah. Indie movies, blockbusters, comedies.
Yeah. I don't think this is anywhere near close to that, but in 2019, he did the third John Wick and was Duke Kaboom in Toy Story. So you could mention that in the conversation, but obviously nowhere near 91. Clearly,
as I was going down this road, there's lots of great movies or years where actors have two great movies in a year. Like Douglas has Fatal Attraction and Wall Street, both in '87. Like that's the year that makes Michael Douglas. Congrats, Mikey D. De Niro has like it's Casino and now I can't think of it. Casino and Heat in '95. Hanks has Philadelphia, Sleepless in Seattle the same year. Jim Carrey's '94 is very famous. Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. But yeah, I think what you said, it's like the diversity of those roles and just like what the world that younger actors used to have to come from, where you're like, I'm going to make an art movie with Gus Van Sant in Portland. I'm going to make a crazy ass surfing blockbuster with Kathryn Bigelow in LA. And then I'm going to make this comedy sequel that some people prefer to the original. Is like so much room to move. Nobody was just like, you need to be in a superhero movie, you're going nowhere. He got to do so much stuff. Okay. We should move to Truth or Trivia, Ben. Have I made you do this before? Yeah, I did.
Yes, I love it.
I made you answer a trivia question about whether sandworms were real or something like that. And you were like, I'm going to guess no, they're not real. Would you rather do Truth or Trivia?
Truth.
Truth. Is it possible that Point Break is one of the top 3 action films of the 90s?
Oh, God. That's a really good question.
You get no time to think about it.
It's in the top 10. I don't think it's in the top 3.
What would be top 3 for you, off the dome?
And this is not necessarily ranked. I guess I'd say
Matrix.
Matrix, Strange Days, Terminator 2, Speed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe Point Break would make the the top 5.
Recency bias. I was kind of like, is this my favorite action movie of the night? It's hard to make an argument that it's more revolutionary or technically accomplished than The Matrix.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, holy shit. Maybe for like pre CG anything. I mean, yeah, it's incredible. But then I was just like, well, do I have to talk about Hard Boiled and pre-America John Woo? And then the conversation got really tough in my mind. Can I make you do a trivia question?
Please, yeah.
It's a multi-parter containing a warm-up that I know you can do. Who are the 4 presidents, Ben?
Oh, so Reagan, Carter, Johnson, and Nixon, right?
Excellent. I knew you could do it. So that's the warm-up for... Those are... HW is president when the movie comes out.
Yeah.
We're missing a president in there, though. Those are not the previous 4 presidents. Someone is left out. Do you know who's left out?
It's Gerald Ford, right?
Indeed. There is something that Ford does not have in common with those other 4 guys that if you were, say, making up an arbitrary reason that he couldn't be included in the ex-presidents, do you know what is different about his presidency than the other 4?
Because he wasn't actually elected, right?
Never elected. Look at you. Just kicking ass.
I'm a political junkie. That's a whole nother podcast.
God, whip inflation. My word. We move to our penultimate segment. As you know well, this series all leads up to the release of the Zendaya Tennis Picture Challengers at the end of April. Unlike me and all the other people who've appeared on this podcast, Ben, you have seen the movie.
Yes.
And I guess what I want to ask you is, should I have done this series attaching it to Challengers?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think you made a great call. And I don't know how much you want me to say about what I thought about the movie, but I do think I know that you're going to be able to have a great conversation about this movie because there are a lot of themes that honestly tie into Point Break. Actually,
I don't know. What was your favorite quality of Challengers? What do you want to say?
Absolutely, Josh O'Connor's performance. I thought he was completely brilliant, and his character is such a piece of shit. Like he's just such a monster, and yet he's so charismatic that the whole time I was going, I know he's a real dick, but I want him to win. He's just more compelling.
Incredible. Well, that gets me excited to see it, and thank you for supporting the existence of this kick, both with your time and insights, and with your pre-release knowledge of Challengers. Is there anything you wanna shout out on the way out?
I don't think so. Just follow me at BCF on Film on Twitter and Instagram. You can see me rant about Matrix 5 and all kinds of other fun stuff. And yeah, that's it.
You know what? Apropos nothing. What article? What's your favorite thing you've written in your time with Willamette Week? What should people go read? If you could direct people to one thing you've written, what would you direct them to?
I would direct them to an interview I did with Tom Schoen, who wrote the book The Nolan Variations, which is the only book about Nolan that Nolan himself collaborated on. And I did this interview as a kind of celebration of the 10th anniversary of The Dark Knight Rises, which is a movie I really, really love. I think much more than most people. And so to talk to Tom, and I started out really just excited to talk to the guy who had Nolan's ear, but then really honestly it became about me sort of using Tom to say what I wanted to say about the Dark Knight trilogy and why those movies have been so important in my life. And that was one of those articles where I was like, no one wants this except me, but I'm gonna do it anyway for my own, personal joy and satisfaction, and I'm really proud of it. And if you don't want to read the whole thing, just read the last quote, because I love the last quote. I love what Tom said. It's the best last quote I've ever gotten out of someone in an interview. So yes, if you are so inclined, check out my interview with Tom Schoen.
Thank you for your time, buddy. Vaya con Dios.
Yes.